Hello there, everyone. I hope everyone had a good Halloween and you're enjoying the weather and it's working out well because I understand a good portion of the country is getting snow or cold. So I hope it's the weather you want. And I hope you had a good holiday, if you call Halloween a holiday and if you observe it. That is, I know that not everybody does, but for those of you who do, I hope you had a good holiday. Today, I want to talk about something that's probably going to seem a little obvious, but maybe not obvious in the sense of the way you might look at it. The idea of running around in circles. Now, sometimes we say those things and we think we're literally sort of like going back and forth, but I want to point something out to you that you probably don't think about. So let's look at this, for example. There's you, and you go forward to do tasks A, and then for some reason that you remember to do something, you have to go back and you go over to task B. And then maybe you have to go over to task C, then you go to task C, and you're literally, if you think about it, if you mapped it out, aren't you sort of like going back and forth? You go from one thing to the other, you go do your laundry, and then you go to the kids, and then you go do this, and you go do that. Now, maybe you're not doing quite all of those things within a space of, say, like 30 minutes. But are you not, in a sense, just running back and forth between one task and another and one task and another? And if you really plot it out, if you could do something like put marks on of where your feet actually were, it probably would make it look like you were going around in circles. Does that make sense? But let's also talk about in a sense of what multitasking is, because if you think about multitasking, you think, well, if I'm going to be multitasking, I'm actually being productive. Not exactly. I'm going to distinguish between multitasking here, two things in multitasking. Two, generally speaking, if we're trying to do something that requires serious cognitive thought, multitasking is actually going to set you back. Now, if you're doing something like washing the floors and putting laundry and doing laundry at the same time, okay, that's cool. Because it's not really anything that you're concentrating really deeply into either one of them. You could be like doing the dishes or making dinner or doing the laundry, or you've got something going on. If you're trying to say like balance your checkbook, pay off the IRS, do your taxes, that is, or, write a paper or prepare a report, and you've got the television on and you're trying to watch, something on Netflix, this is not going to be productive. Now, people say, oh, I can do two or three things at one time. And well, yeah, sort of, kind of, but no. So let's just go with that you've got task A that you're doing over here. So you're concentrating on task A. Then you go back to task B. Then you go from task B back to task A. And task A back to task B. Do you not? So you're going back and forth between two different items. The problem here is your brain doesn't work that way. Your brain, when you're thinking of task A, your brain is focusing on task A. Then you shift it and move your gears to go to look at task B. Your brain has to have a small buffer, if you will, if there's a latency period in which your brain is sitting there saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? Where am I? Because this is not what I was doing. And then you get to task B, brain focuses on task B, then you shift from task B and you go back to task A, and your brain has to go through that again. So you're losing a little time. Now, granted, it might be microseconds, but in the long run, what you're doing is the time may not grow great. Yeah, the time may not be great if you're looking at doing this over the course of an hour. You might lose maybe, let's just say 5 minutes. So you may say that's not a big deal. The problem is it loses the focus. So that when you're going from doing something on task A and then your focus breaks, you're having to come back. You go to task B and then you're having to come back to task A, and you're going to spend more time trying to figure out what you were doing before. Now think in terms of that if you drive and you're driving in the car, you might be having a conversation and then something happens, something darts out, you see somebody's brake lights or something. You have to probably stop the conversation right then and there and focus on the car, right? Or something happens, you're doing whatever, and your kid comes in and you notice blood. Your focus is going to go on that and it's off on something else. If you got something on the stove, you might forget that and it boils over, whatever. So your focus goes on to whatever it is that you're aiming at. It doesn't go on to that. And when you go back and forth between multiple tasks, you're losing your time and you're losing your focus and you're losing the concentration that you had on whatever task you were looking for in the first place. So for those of you who have ever tried to do, say, like do math and do homework, many of you will say that you have to concentrate on your math to do the math, because if your focus goes off on someplace else, you're gone. And that's the same basic principle. And even if you don't think that that's happening, it really is. You just may be good enough at math that it doesn't appear to be that you're having to shift your focus back. But you are. Your brain just doesn't work that way. You've got to take a look at the one topic, finish that, and then go on and do something else. So when you're multitasking, you're really not doing anything to your benefit, so that you are, in a sense, going back and forth in circles and not really accomplishing anything, because you're not really concentrating on it. I would be willing to bet if you wrote a paper, a report, or some such thing like that, and you gave it to somebody, came back and looked at it later. Let me backtrack. If you were writing a report or a paper or something like that, while you were multitasking, and then came back and looked at it later, you would probably find that there's certain sections in there that didn't quite make sense to you. And it's like, what was I thinking when I wrote that? Has anybody ever been there? I know I have. You look at, I've done papers like that, test answers on tests, and I give them and I say, what are you saying here? And the student looks at them and says, I have no clue. It's like, well, then I don't either, But the thing about it is when you're writing something and your attention goes off, you've basically broken that piece of concentration, and it becomes very difficult to bring your concentration back to wherever it was once your concentration goes off and takes a hike. So that when you're multitasking in a sense of cognitive, concentrated thought process, you're not doing yourself any good. When you're doing some different tasks and you're going off in different directions during the course of the day, you might, and to tie this back into what I started with, if you think in terms that you've got 20 things during the day that you need to do, and you go off and do those 20 different things, back to the illustration that I had at the very beginning of this, which I have now erased, you're going off to task A, then you're coming back, and then you're going to task C. You're going 20 steps in 20 different directions. You're not going 20 steps in one direction, because you keep going forward and coming backward and going forward and coming backward. So either A, you're going in circles, or B, you're not going anywhere at all. And then you sit there and wonder why you're not accomplishing anything, because you're essentially not going anywhere, if that makes sense. So if you think in terms of, well, maybe some of you say, well, I'll go off in a direction and I'm not doing anything, so I'll have to come back. Think in terms of taking a trip. I mean, if you go out and you're going from, across town or whatever to the grocery store or something, and then you say, oh, I forgot something, and you have to go back home, and then you go back out again, and then, something happened, or you get diverted and you go back home, you're never going to end up at the grocery store where you're going in the first place, because you keep going back and forth and never end up at your destination. So that many of you do this during the course of the day, and then you can't figure out why you're not accomplishing anything. I would suggest that you start looking at the tasks that you need to accomplish, focus on one major thing and get it done, or focus on segments of time and concentrate on getting a certain thing accomplished. Let's just use writing a paper, just because it makes it easier for me to do this. So if you're thinking in terms that you've got a report or a paper to do, just say, okay, today I'm going to do my research. Do your research and get that done. Finished. It's all encapsulated and it's done. Then the next day you might do another part. So you finish that section of whatever it is that you're planned on doing. Maybe one day you're going to write out your rough draft or your outline. Do it that way. That's the end of that task, and you go on and do another task. If you're trying to do your research over the course of several days when you got 10 or 15 minutes, that's going to actually take you longer. Okay? Does this make sense? So that if you feel like you're going in circles, you might actually be. So you're going to be better off if you focus on that one activity, or schedule time to focus on that activity, get that done, and then go off and do something else. Again, this is probably easier to see when you're watching other people do it, but I suggest you might want to pay attention to what you're doing, and in a sense, map out your steps and see how many of them make you feel like you're going in circles or actually going nowhere because you're not moving. Check it out. And if you think this is helpful, send it on to somebody else. Let me know if this made sense and if it was helpful to you, because I really would appreciate your comments on this. So I hope everybody's got a good day and a good start to November, and we will chat with you later.